Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the CAC. I'm Ian Spula with the Programs Department. And I just want to give a really special thank you to all the members here today. I think we're over 90% members in attendance. Daytime talks, as most of you know, are a regular offering, a member benefit, and we really take pride in putting together sort of a wide-ranging spectrum of topics over the course of the year that we hope appeal to a lot of your interests. So thanks for supporting us. Before I introduce today's speaker, just a quick run through a few upcoming events, which you've probably seen scrolling on the screen. On February 4th, the Future of Airport Design will bring together a panel of aviation design leaders. So we have representatives from SAFTI, from HOK Chicago, and from Studio Gang to look at how the best airports are balancing travelers' needs against sort of aspirational design and strengthening a city's identity. So they'll talk about how they're pushing the envelope, but in sort of a way that continues to facilitate ease of transit and makes airports more than just transit hubs. That's almost sold out, so I'll jump on that soon if you are interested. And then on February 24th in the evening, we have another conversation with three architects discussing some of the best new green buildings in the city. So many of the best new green buildings we're seeing are institutional in nature, university facilities, libraries, community centers. So we'll hold up three of these examples of some really great innovation in eco-friendly design. And Farr Associates, John Ronan Architects, and COO will all discuss project on the South Side. And lastly, we have a class on March 3rd and 10th in the evening, 6 o'clock. It's called Getting to Know Your House. It's a two-part evening class facilitated by planner and architectural historian Matt Wickland. And we're gearing it towards owners of older homes with a lot of history to uncover. Matt will give some tips and tools for researching your house, so bring a laptop and do some research right on the spot. And then remember, all these programs are taking place right here. More info is on the website. And then turning to today's program, Adaptable House, the Next Chicago Bungalow. In 2019, AAA Chicago organized a disruptive design competition, inviting architects, designers, developers to submit their ideas. The competition challenged participants to devise a versatile starter home as a solution to a growing middle-class housing shortage. And hundreds of submissions were received. But it's my pleasure now to introduce architect Greg Tamburino to present his winning prototype, Adaptable House. Greg's a senior associate with Perkins & Will, 25 years of experience, including single-family home design and construction, large-scale urban planning projects, luxury hospitality, and most recently, affordable housing. In addition to developing the winning proposal for this disruptive design competition, Greg's currently working with local developers on complex high-rise projects. He's an alum of the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and the University of Pennsylvania Stuart Weitzman School of Design, where he earned a master's degree in architecture. So without further ado, Greg.
All right. Thank you, Ian, for inviting me here to speak about the Disruptive Design Competition. Very pleased to have this opportunity to share with all of you the story about the competition and how we are trying to help sort out the problem of attainable housing in our city. I'll begin with a little background about myself. My name is Greg Tamburino, and although I've traveled many places, I'm a product of the Midwest. Growing up in Wisconsin, and after having bounced around to a few different cities, I've had the pleasure of calling Chicago my home for the past 17 years. And for the past 14 years, I've been with the Chicago office of Perkins & Will. We are a global architecture and design firm specializing in architecture and interior design. We are celebrating our 85th year, having been founded in 1935 right here in Chicago. And having since grown to 2,700 employees and 26 offices around the world, we have 14 areas of practice, and I have had the opportunity to work in several of them. But for most of my career, my focus has been on urban high-rise, residential, and mixed-use commercial buildings. I developed an interest in architecture and in general the craft of building things when I was a teenager working for my dad's construction company. Here I learned everything from keeping a job site clean to swinging a hammer in 10-degree below zero weather, which after a few years I very much determined I wasn't cut out for, swinging a hammer, doing anything in 10 degrees below zero weather. And eventually I decided I would go away to architecture school. And I feel genuinely lucky to have bounced around to a wide variety of work experiences because I feel like there's some component of each that trains you to be ready for whatever comes next. Everything from the intricacies of how a piece of furniture goes together at one scale, working for a furniture designer, to working on master plans for whole cities with an urban planning firm on the other scale. In my career, I've had the chance to work on very high-end luxury residential and hospitality projects with astounding high budgets, to traveling to other countries and learning and adapting to different cultures. And there are many more jobs I've had over the years, but the point is there is some piece of each of these experiences that I can point to when I think about how I work and how I think about design. And I'm here today to talk with you about the disruptive design competition. Because to be honest, the issues that the competition is dealing with are things that I have been contemplating my entire career and involve experiences that I can relate to for much of my life. But it was the combination of those interests and experiences along with the timing of the competition that really pushed me to finally explore the design for an affordable home. To transition the conversation to the design of the house, I would like to make some conceptual connections to projects I've worked on that directly affect the way I think about design, and then I will show how my design and how it addresses each of the goals of the competition. I'll talk a little bit about what the disruptive design competition is, including who envisioned it, the problems they are trying to address, the multi-phased process, and how it unfolds. And after that, we'll have time for a few questions. So whose idea was this? I can tell you it was not mine. It was a group called the Chicago Housing Policy Task Force, and is composed of a group of organizations with a common goal of investing in the creation of affordable housing in Chicago. So the group includes Neighborhood Housing Services, the Chicago Neighborhood Initiative, AIA Chicago, LISC Chicago, and Northern Trust. Competition is also sponsored by various groups, one of which is the developer Related Midwest, who's the company behind the mega development, the 78, and the highly successful mixed income community Lathrop Homes, both of which are in Chicago. Related has generously committed to building 2 prototypes of the house beginning later this year. So in the presentation, if I refer to we, it's myself as the designer and Related as acting as the developer, and the task force as sort of the owner. So what is the problem we are trying to help solve? The Chicago Housing Policy Task Force recognized the challenges that working families and young people face when looking to buy their first home. Construction costs are on the rise across the country, resulting in fewer starter homes being built for growing and working families. Home prices have outpaced income growth, resulting in a housing shortage for the entry-level and first-time buyers. And despite an unemployment rate the U.S. has not seen for decades, wage growth has remained stagnant. Low and moderate income Americans are without savings, living paycheck to paycheck, and cannot afford what generations have taken for granted before them, affordable housing. So, as this whole affordability crisis is unraveling, and not just in Chicago, but in cities all over the U.S., our south and west sides have thousands of vacant, abandoned, or empty lots, along with an aging housing stock. And you can see here on the map from the Chicago Cityscape blog the dense concentration of dark gray dots representing the thousands of vacant lots in the city. And you can see how they are quite literally concentrated in the south and west sides. The red dot, by the way, is where we are right now. So the red outlines are the two neighborhoods specifically chosen by the task force for the competition. The red box at the top represents West Humboldt Park, and the irregular shaped boundary to the south near the lake is Bronzeville. So we did not have exact vacant lots to work with in phase one of the competition. It was sort of ambiguous, but we were instructed to design for the typical 25-foot wide by 125-foot deep standard size Chicago City lot. We were also to assume utilities were provided to the property, and we were to assume that it could be either a corner lot with the long side exposed to a street as well as the short side, or an infill lot. In fact, we were to design for both. So there were several other technical requirements, but what is important are the project goals listed here. Decrease the cost of construction for single-family homes, provide flexible and innovative designs that respect and complement historic neighborhood architecture, incorporate a wealth building component, such as a live workspace or income unit, increase accessibility and options for aging in place, and maybe the most difficult of all, designs must have a purchase price lower than $250,000, or $350,000 if we chose to design for a 2-unit duplex. And in phase one of the project, I chose to design the duplex because I felt it was easier to hit that price point. So this equates to being affordable to a family of 3 at 100% area median income, making about $75,000 per year. As I mentioned, there are 3 phases to this competition, and technically we are now in phase 3 being sort of make it happen, build it. Phase 1 began in fall of 2018 when, as Ian mentioned, the AIA posted on their website a call for designers and architects to submit their entries to the competition, and the requirements were pretty straightforward. It was one single 11 by 17 image, and you can see my submission here, along with a 250-word written design narrative, and then written responses to 5 specific questions detailing how we intend our design to address sustainability, zoning and code requirements, a wealth building component, and again, the most difficult one, cost. The 3 finalists were chosen by a jury that included architects, local developers, and academics studying housing and community development. 3 finalists from phase 1 would later present our drawings to the same jury at the end of phase 2, as well as receive their feedback about our designs after each phase. So they selected the 3 finalists. We hadn't met them in person or presented to them, but we did at the end of phase 2 when we had developed our boards. So this phase 1 received over 130 entries, some from foreign countries, and it was a blind jury. No personal information could be on the boards. And if you go to the Disruptive Design website, you can download a high-resolution version of all of these boards, and I suggest you check some of them out because there's really a wide variety of interesting and amazing submissions. So from there, 3 finalists, as I'm showing here, were selected to move on to phase 2. Oddly enough, all 3 were from Chicago. Phase 2 was a bit more rigorous and fast-moving. Everyone kind of upped their game and took things a little more seriously. And it entailed a series of community meetings in each of the 2 neighborhoods, West Humboldt Park and Bronzeville. The first set of community meetings was to gather feedback on the designs from our phase 1 entry, and we were invited to present again several weeks later when we had 3 fully rendered large-scale presentation boards with detailed plans of our phase 2 proposals. And at this stage, specific lots were provided by the committee, 1 lot in each neighborhood. So at this point in the process, along with meeting people in the community and the aldermen at the community meetings, we had a better sense of the neighborhoods and a realistic site and context to design to. This is one of the three finalists in no particular order. This is by Joel Huffman, another Chicago-based architect. So I'm speaking on his behalf now. His project is titled Green Flex 600. And the 600 refers to the 600 square foot module that he stacks in various ways on the lot to accommodate a variety of homeowner lifestyles or needs. The concept anticipates the benefits of ADUs, accessory dwelling units, like a coach house, to create more density in neighborhoods zoned for single-family detached. His proposal has a very low cost of entry because of the idea that you could build and live in a single 600 square foot tiny home, as shown on the right, and later, when you have the resources, build any configuration of unit to live in while renting out the ADU. And he's showing an example here of that with the 1,800 square foot two-story unit plus basement on the left, and the other single 600 square foot sort of tiny home on the same lot, just to the right of the primary structure. This is the second of the third entries. This is, again, from a Chicago team by architect Georgy Todorov and designer Petya Petrova. And theirs is titled Urban Cabin. It's focused on keeping costs down by designing a simple shaped building that is slab on grade, has durable and low maintenance materials, and takes advantage of an innovative and environmentally friendly system called cross-laminated timber construction, where large slabs of lumber are adhered together under factory conditions and when delivered to the site can quickly be erected to reduce the construction schedule. And I really particularly like their design and their renderings, and especially their use of materials, and I just like the simplicity of form. Here's my entry from phase 2, and although the floor plan has changed considerably, I'll show you that. It's now much smaller and more compact. It still maintains all the initial goals of having a flexible layout, a connection with nature and wellness, accessible features, an income-generating option for the homeowner, and I'll show you those in detail. I titled it Adaptable House because I really envisioned for this to be successful at any level, it needs to adapt to a wide variety of living conditions. It should be able to adapt as your life changes, whether that is a financial change, a change in the size of the family, you might have to live with a handicap that you didn't anticipate, or even just growing old but wanting to live at home or live with an extended family. That, to me, is what makes a community stronger. It's designed for those type of people that want to plant their roots and invest in a neighborhood and not just live there temporarily. I also designed the house adaptable in a way that it can be constructed either as a single-family home or as a rental. I'll show details of that later as well. The competition brief required entries to pick one or the other, but I felt that it was far more functional in the long term for the home to be able to be adapted from a two-flat to a single family, or the other way around, so that as the family grows, either by having children or joined by aging relatives, or you simply just need more room, they could adapt the house to their needs. So that concludes phase 2 of the competition. I was and still very much am overwhelmingly proud to be selected as the winner to move on to phase 3 and work with related NHS and CNI and the rest of the task force to further develop the details, work on cost, select final lots, and work along with the city of Chicago to build 2 prototypes of the design. Phase 3 is a sort of proof of concept phase and hopefully inspire a whole lot more investment like this in these communities that not only need it more, but have not had investment like this for a long, long time. I very briefly want to take a step back and zoom out and make a connection to 2 or 3 projects that in some ways are very different from the competition starter homes we are designing. I would just say that, while working nights and weekends on the competition because I was doing it outside my 9-to-5 job, I kept thinking about how many significant parallels there are between the design of a large, high-rise, multifamily building that I know so well and work on every day that have very different budgets and targets and goals, and something as and how that compares to something as small as a single-family detached home. And I started sort of realizing that there are very many parallels. There are constraints and demands on large, big-budget buildings that, to me, directly translate to the other projects, regardless of scale. For example, designing spaces to be as spatially and structurally efficient as possible, and orienting windows to take advantage of views or to bring light deep into a space. This is a project that I worked on my first day at Perkins & Will in 2005. I probably have 100 versions of a typical floor that we used to find the right balance of unit size and function. This was a very wide lot and has a very wide floor plate, and like the homes on the deep, narrow Chicago lot, we wanted to get as much natural light as deep into the space as possible. So we have very open and bright 10-foot ceilings with floor-to-ceiling glass on the exterior. This is actually a pair of projects also in Chicago and also located along the Chicago River, which directly influenced how I thought about my design for Adaptable House. For one, the day one directive from the owner and the developer, Lendlease, was that we both integrate the building with nature and we integrate the park with the neighboring community. So they approached the project with a strong sense of social responsibility from the very beginning. The image on the right, lower right, is actually stacked residential units, townhome residential units at the podium that wraps the tower. So that tower behind is connected to that. The units overlook the park, but they also hide a 6-story parking garage from sight. The whole facade is activated, and the ground floor units have open patios facing the green space and are separated from the park by a wetland feature that is irrigated by rainwater collected on the roofs. The roof has a vegetable garden and beehives pictured on the upper left. The 2-acre park is full of native species of plants and becomes an amenity for the neighboring community, as well as the people that live in the building. And these parallels will make more sense when I get to my current design. Now, a quick reference to 3 relevant housing types that are part of the Chicago vernacular and heritage of the city. And quite unlike the glassy high-rise buildings, these modest historical examples of Chicago living also directly influence how we think about contemporary design. The first being the 19th century workers' cottage with its simple, standardized plan and understated design. These were often mass-produced and very much intended to be affordable. They are long and narrow, usually 1 or 1.5 stories, and almost always a classic box shape with a pitched gable roof facing the street. Next is the Chicago 2-flat, 2-story building with an apartment unit on each floor, stacked one above the other. These are characterized by a front porch, bay window facing the street, modest architectural expression, so not much ornamentation, and strong, durable exterior materials such as brick or stone. Chicago was growing, and it made sense to build denser housing. And this was often a starter home for immigrants or first-generation Americans looking to invest in the communities in which they live. They, again, are simple, understated designs. It's a combination single-family house with a live-in landlord coupled with an affordable apartment for added income to the property owner. Sounds very familiar, doesn't it? They are abundant in Chicago, about 1/4 of our housing stock, but unfortunately these are aging and deteriorating and expensive to maintain, making affordable housing options even harder to find. Finally, there's the distinctly Chicagoan bungalow that makes up a bulk of our housing with about 80,000 units around the city. These are early 1900s, 1910 to 1929 or 30, usually solid brick construction, fire resistant, and really built to last. They are characterized by having an offset front entrance or side entrance and plenty of windows to bring in natural light and fresh air. So like the 2-flat and the workers' cottage before, we have a focus on functional use of space and simplicity of form. And like the two flat, these were starter homes for a generation of immigrants looking for a place of their own in the city. So what is next? That brings us to the competition. What will be our next interpretation of the affordable Chicago house for the missing middle? I am pleased to announce we have a site in West Humboldt Park, and it's mid-block. The street facade faces west, and it's adjacent to what appears to be another vacant lot. I'm showing here the adaptable in the orange circle. The adaptable house is rendered in the empty lot. It's actually two vacant lots next to each other. So we are currently working with the City of Chicago on acquiring a vacant lot in Bronzeville, and as soon as that happens, we want to move forward as fast as possible and get these built. So before I go into the house, I'll just start with this basic diagram representing what is a typical condition in most Chicago neighborhoods, for those of you that might not be from the city or familiar. Here, the light gray roof in the center represents my design for the house, not on the current site that I just showed you, but a relation to neighboring buildings on another site we had been looking to acquire. But the argument for it is the same. On the left, you have the public realm, which is often a tree-lined street, followed by a strip of grass and a pedestrian sidewalk. So in Chicago, it is uncommon to have vehicular driveways off the primary street. Instead, we have a network of narrow alleyways where cars barely fit past each other, where the garbage and services are picked up. Kids often play. Like I mentioned, the lots are very narrow and very deep, and usually oriented with the long dimension facing south, like shown here, which is actually ideal in this climate for taking advantage of solar paths. Immediately off the alley is often a two-car garage, but not always the case. Sometimes it's just a concrete pad. The deep lots do come with the benefit of the opportunity for a private backyard, and I want to point out for my design in the middle, the walkway that connects the parking along the alley to the house, as well as the connection from the public sidewalk to the front of the house. Keep this in mind because it'll be discussed when it comes to the interior layout later. Typically, the front yard setback is established by zoning, or on sites like this one, limited by the average setback of the two neighboring buildings on either side. So this line defines the location of the front of the house. Regulated by zoning requirements, side yard setbacks can vary in dimension and is dependent on a few things, including the fire rating of the side load-bearing walls. This is important because it really dictates your room layout when you're starting with 25 feet and you're working down to 19 feet wide for the house. We ended up setting our side yards to 3 feet on each side. For one, it allows for a handicap accessible route on one side of the building, like I'm showing on the south, and it reduces the cost overall of the building because you don't have to build a 2-hour firewall on the north side. As you can see then, the overall depth of the house is really the only variable left to control the size. And that is the first way we focused on controlling cost, by reworking the floor plan through dozens of iterations to make it as compact and efficient as possible. And we really might not be done yet, but we do feel we have a cost-effective and functional plan that occupies as compact a footprint as possible. I put most of my focus of the exterior design on the front of the house. The remaining 3 sides are pretty basic and unadorned, and I was especially interested in the transition between the public realm of the street and sidewalk and the private realm of the house. You know, the space in between really the front yard. I felt that was a big opportunity to utilize some design ideas that I had learned in the past. And I wanted the home to feel open and connected to the exterior, and at the same time create a living space that can be private and separated from the outdoors if the homeowner chooses. So the whole approach to the front of the house is to make it feel open and connected to the community, while at the same time maintaining a sense of privacy and security. And there are a few ways I went about to achieve this. One, the ground floor facade is as glassy and open as I could make it, which sort of enhances the feeling of safety from inside and on the street, because windows give you a feel that there are eyes on the street. But the windows are set in behind a deep porch overhang, which shades the living space from the hot west summer sun. The porch was actually kind of large and almost exaggerated. I think it gives the house some personality, and it defines that space that transitions between indoor and outdoors. Outside that is a raised bed of planters that are native and do not require extensive irrigation or upkeep, along with this low horizontal transparent front fence. The planting also acts as a barrier defining the semi sort of private zone of the porch, as well as the fence, which is intentionally transparent. The ground floor is slab-on-grade construction, again to save on cost, but I raised it 2 feet above the surrounding lot to give the house a feeling of presence. And when you're sitting on the porch, it's kind of nice because you're at eye level with the people that are walking by. The directive from the jury and the community meetings was that the house must have curb appeal. And what does that mean? I don't know. I chose a warm, natural material, possibly cedar, possibly another wood, to wrap the front porch, above, below, and to the sides. The palette of materials on the house are intentionally humble and commonly available. And if we are going to spend a little bit more money, I wanted it to be at the front of the house where you're up close to it and you can see it. I figured the porch is the perfect place for that. The remainder of the house can be clad in a variety of options, whatever the homeowner really wants, but they need to be chosen for their durability and relative low maintenance. We don't want the homes to look worn out from age. Weathering is fine, but deterioration is not okay. From the day I began the project, I decided on the steep pitch gable roof. It reads as sort of this icon of home and has an uplifting presence on the street. It's simple to construct, easy to detail to avoid problems with snow and ice and rain. It just made sense, so I didn't debate to do with that part. However, I must have tried 1,000 variations of the upstairs window. I wanted to bring light deep into the space, and it needed to be a tall window. And in the end, I really like this sort of 3-wide tripart division of a square that in a subtle way references both the bay window of the old Chicago 2-flat and the sort of historic Chicago window that covers the turn-of-century skyscrapers in the Chicago Loop. So I kind of like that reference. The gate brings visitors in on axis with the house. And like the Chicago Bungalow we talked about earlier, the entry is recessed and to the side, and in this case protected by the deep overhangs of the porch. These building sections are simply to help understand the next series of floor plans, so I'll explain that in a moment. These plans show how the shell of the building can be built as either a single-family layout on the left or a 2-flat unit on the right. And in this diagram, note on the left, the orange. There's an orange dot in front of the door. That's your main door to the house. It can take you upstairs to the bedrooms, or it can take you directly into the living space down below. And then that white dot, that front door off the porch, is merely a convenience to access the porch easily. And on the right, where you have one unit above the other, the porch door, the dark purple circle on the left, is your main entry point to the lower level. And then, of course, the other door takes you up to the upstairs. You might notice that the floor plan is actually the same on the left and the right in this diagram, and what I'm showing here are all the walls and features of the plan that are common to both. So in other words, the outer shell and some core components of the home are the same, regardless if it's a single-family house or if it's a two-flat. But then there are portions of the internals that can be reconfigured up front or sometime after construction to adapt to a range of needs. So you can see here highlighted in color the minor differences between the two plans. The two-flat on the right is a one-bedroom, one-bath, single-floor unit. It could be the live-in landlord example from before. A fire-rated wall shown in blue separates the upstairs entry from the downstairs living space. It's right here. The ground floor of the single-family plan on the left has at the back of the house what we're calling a flex space. So this could be an extra bedroom, a formal dining room, a media room, a studio space, a work-from-home office. It's really another potential source of income from the home. And then this one has a back door to make it easy to access. It's a single-family house, so it has a private backyard. And then on the right, a walk-in closet and door just completes the private bedroom. And this shows how the upstairs can be laid out. Plumbing risers are in the same location for either scheme. On the left, it is upstairs, upper left. It's turned into a master suite with a walk-in closet and private bathroom. On the right, the upstairs unit of the duplex, the plumbing riser is used for a full-size kitchen, and the remaining space is for a little more compact living and dining room than the other floors. And here's just another view populated with furniture. In either of the schemes, the extra bedrooms are flexible spaces that could be used as a work-from-home office. It was also a requirement of the competition to design a home that is visitable by someone with a physical disability, as well as accommodating for an elderly person that wishes to age in place. It was important to me, as I pointed out earlier, that the first level floor be raised above the surrounding grade. So I developed a side yard ramp that connects visitors from the front sidewalk to an intermediate landing, and that's where the door happens to go upstairs. And then that ramp turns back and connects to a porch where there's the handicap accessible entrance. And that's the door for that is shown here in bold. And then another ramp connects the entry to the backyard and to the parking space of the alley. This way, the entire ground floor of either design is fully accessible. The stair is sized and reinforced to accommodate a wheelchair lift in the future, if the homeowner desires. This way, each floor of the single-family house can be fully accessible. Again, all the doors, shown here in black, are designed to accommodate the passage of wheelchairs. The red represents added reinforcement or blocking inside the walls to accommodate future grab bars if they're needed. And finally, items like door handles and cabinet pulls and light switches and outlets and plumbing fixtures are all designed to be within reach range to be more accommodating to those with a wider range of disabilities. Structural efficiency. I'd like to point out a few ways that I'm looking to make the form and structure of the house as efficient as possible. The first decision was to focus on making a compact form, because a compact form is most efficient for conserving energy. So the closer to a cube we can make the form, the more cost and energy efficient it will be from the start. Reducing the footprint of the house is one of the most direct ways of controlling the overall building costs as well. A simple rectangle is also the most efficient use of framing materials, as opposed to a shape with several intersections and changes in plane that would require complicated and costly structural framing solutions. To reduce construction waste as much as possible, the entire house is laid out on 24-inch grid, which is the most common dimension for lumber and sheet goods. Windows, highlighted here in blue, are spaced between studs in the load-bearing walls on module to simplify the framing and again to reduce framing materials. And we are studying the value added of advanced framing techniques, which means all the structural members from the roof truss to the load-bearing wall studs and floor joists are aligned directly one over the other to further reduce lumber, and it does reduces material cost, reduces labor cost, and measurably improves the thermal performance of the house. Then a quick note on how we optimized the layout to fit a very compact floor plan. The floor plan is designed to be as space efficient as possible by working to eliminate non-functional space. And this is similar to the way we optimize room sizes in the big multifamily high-rise projects. Rooms are sized to accommodate an ideal furniture layout as opposed to trying to fit furniture into an irregularly shaped room. But furniture placement is not strictly controlled, of course. There remains flexibility in the arrangement, but the spaces are well defined and sized to work well. Living spaces are located near the exterior walls at the ends, with the kitchen and storage at the center of the building, with fixed plumbing chases, which are shown here in red. And the plumbing chases stack and plan for short as possible and efficient plumbing runs. The main gathering area of the house is a flexible open plan that accommodates everyday activities from lounging to dining and has a visual connection between the entry, the primary circulation, and the center of the home, that is the kitchen. And it just results in a very compact and efficient plan, and it may not be over yet. We are continually trying to refine and make it as efficient as possible. By locating the living spaces towards the ends, facing the front and rear yards with tall windows, we are able to maximize daylight to those spaces, offer views to the outdoors, and operable windows allow for fresh air to flow through the house. When built out as a single-family home, private bedrooms are clustered upstairs, away from the more active live-work areas below. Okay, the efficient use of energy and resources. The development team, the competition organizers, and we all agree that the home not only needs to be affordable, but it needs to be affordable to maintain and affordable to operate. We also have very ambitious goals and are in the early stages of exploring some of them to see if we can make the home net zero ready. In other words, by adding solar panels to the roof, constructing a home that, when averaged over the course of a year, generates at least as much on-site renewable energy as it consumes. The first way to go about doing that is reduce the amount of energy consumption to the point that PV solar array makes sense. So in an effort to reduce energy consumption, some steps in that direction that we are exploring include all LED lighting throughout the house, high efficiency Energy Star appliances and water heaters, mini split heating and air conditioning, energy recovery or heat recovery ventilation, low flow water fixtures that consume less energy, thus consuming less hot water. We're also looking into all electric appliances, that means no gas range, and plan to have the roof truss engineered to handle the added weight of future solar panels. We even plan to bring conduit to the roof so that the house is truly solar power ready. We are also looking to increase the level of insulation as much as possible. So after figuring out how you conserve all the energy with the previous slide, we need to look at how to retain it. So some systems and technologies that we're either already employing or considering to include on the house is an exterior layer of continuous insulation to greatly reduce the thermal bridging. The advanced framing techniques, so spacing the studs farther apart and aligning the structure, as I mentioned, from the roof to the foundation to further reduce, save on material and money, but actually make the job easier and faster for the trades running conduit, pipe, and mechanical systems because stud and joist bays have more room. Air sealing is the most basic and cost-effective effort you can make to increase the energy efficiency in new construction. So accompanied by proper ventilation with energy and heat recovery, right-sized mechanical systems, and optimized wall insulation, it's really not that complicated to have a high-performing, energy-efficient, and comfortable home. We are looking at unvented roof assemblies to simplify the detailing, and similar to our wall construction with the continuous insulation at the exterior, if you locate a portion of the insulation above the roof sheathing and below the shingles, you greatly reduce the thermal bridging and increase your efficiency. We are talking to manufacturers for low U-value doors and windows, so we're in contact with people that can offer triple pane glazing at a fairly affordable rate. And finally, closed cell spray foam insulation as a way to fill all the gaps and make the building as airtight as possible. So that basically concludes my presentation. Thank you again. I will open it up for questions, but a few pointers of what challenges does the design team face. That one's easy. It's primarily cost. We continue to refine the design, and what I'm showing you here is what we hope it to look like. It'll function in the same way that I described, but there might be a VE exercise in terms of materials and some of the options. And then where do we go from here? We're tackling some bigger ideas, like I mentioned the solar arrays. We're thinking about things like geothermal as an option, or offering the customer sort of a good, better, and best option, where good gets you a high-performing, comfortable house with the features that I mentioned, but you can add on to any level that you want. Maybe it's super insulated, or sky's the limit, really. So thank you.
That's wonderful. So you're going to build about 100,000 of these? I had two quick questions. One was, I noticed one of the finalists had 2 units on a lot, which is, my understanding, currently is not allowed in the city. Do you have any insight if the city is going towards allowing that? And number 2, I'm just wondering how someone in the single-family home gets to the 2nd floor in a wheelchair.
Good. Excellent questions. The first one, your observation is correct. The city doesn't recognize ADUs currently. I don't know where that stands, but I know there's a big effort to change that. And that was kind of a problem with those entries, those competition entries that showed it that way. My unit I deliberately left is just a parking pad in the back. No garage was designed. A, it keeps costs down, but B, maybe when that rule changes, someone could build a garage with a coach house, or increase the density even more. And then your question about the single-family house, that's a tough one, because the ground floor could be made into a bedroom suite next to the bathroom, and then the entire ground floor is fully accessible without a problem. It has the kitchen, the bathroom, the bedroom, the living space. My solution, and I wish there was a better one, was I showed on that slide some reinforcing at the stair, where you could add, and the stair is wide to accommodate a wheelchair lift to get up to the 2nd floor.
I have a couple questions. One is, on your 2-unit thing, I didn't notice a second exit. So what are people supposed to do, jump out the back window? That's one question.
From the upstairs.
Yeah.
Technically, by code, when the footprint is small enough, you're only required to have one exit.
Okay. And then the other thing was, I'm interested in how you would control the noise in a 2-unit thing between the units. We live in a brick and concrete building, and it's fabulous. You don't hear the neighbors at all, but I would be very concerned about that. How are you addressing that?
That's an excellent concern, and I would be concerned about that as well. Well, for one, the units have to be separated by a fire-rated construction, so that's a little bit more robust. You have a few more layers in the assembly that will absorb some of the sound. But I think I'd be more sensitive to the noise in the bedroom, so at that lower level, we're considering maybe a slightly dropped ceiling in the bedroom that's sort of isolated from the structure that's above, so at least that will absorb some of the sound. And then the living spaces sort of stack one above the other, and then there's only one bedroom downstairs, and that would be my primary concern for sound.
Yeah, I'd encourage you to think about that for the whole space, because those of us who would be spending a lot of time would be spending time in the other spaces and wouldn't want the noise either, besides bedrooms. The third the question and final one is, it really doesn't look like a lot of light other than the front. And as we get older, light is something we yearn for. And I noticed there was only one window on this side, and I can't really tell if there was, I think there was one window on this side. So I'm just wondering why you minimized the number of windows.
That's another good question. We had skylights shown in the earlier design, and those aren't gone by any means, but we're kind of reconsidering the impact that those have to the energy efficiency of the house, and looking to substitute those with, I think it's called like a solar tube, where it's a smaller opening in the roof. It has a glazed like acrylic dome, and then it just sort of diffuses light. And they're really good for things like laundry rooms and bathrooms that you might not even need to flip on a light to use. There's always natural ambient light, especially in the city with street lights. I think those could be effective for addressing that specific concern. And the skylights were intended to, just how deep the house is on the deep lot, to bring light into the stairs of a dangerous place to walk in in the dark. So they're over the stair, and they bring light deep into the middle of the house where there isn't as much of an opportunity for windows. And some of these sites are immediately next to maybe like a 3 or 4 story multi-unit building that's a brick wall with a 0 lot line condition. So you're only 3 feet away, and your window isn't really getting much light from the side anyhow. So I think if it's not the skylights, maybe the solar tube or something like that to address that concern.
Could you explain how a ventless roof would work?
That was actually a new one for me, so I researched it quite a bit. The roof obviously is where you have the greatest heat loss, and you can cut down on the heat loss by putting all the insulation on the outside of the structure, because wood or metal or whatever the structure is made out of is a very poor insulator. Now the roofs are vented to get the condensation out, and if you have no vent, you have to keep the sheathing or the structure at a certain temperature so it doesn't condense. So you have to have exactly the right thickness and amount of insulation above the roof for it to work, and code dictates it. So if you follow building code, it should be in good shape and detail it right.
I'm curious if there's a process in place yet for identifying the first occupants for the 2 prototype homes, and if they would be home buyers, or if they would be more part of the prototyping process where they might live there and maybe you'd get feedback and refine the design.
That's an excellent question that I wish I knew the answer to. I could probably find out the answer, because there's definitely needs to be a process in place, and there's definitely a lot of interest in that very thing. And as far as I know, it's whoever's interested. You don't have to have a certain criteria, because what they are hoping to do is just demonstrate with 2 that this is a workable concept, that it's sort of an economically sustainable idea, that you could build as many as you want. And they don't all have to look like this. This is just sort of, like I said, a prototype, and you could have any variation. This isn't even the correct solution to the problem necessarily. It's going to look different and need to be different wherever you build it, especially in different cities with different sized lots.
Was there talk that there might be given some priority to people who currently live in these neighborhoods, just a concern of, just kind of keeping people who live there being able to stay there?
Yeah, that is my understanding.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the presentation. I was curious about costs and scalability. So if you build one house, it has a certain cost. If you build 10 of these at the same time in the same neighborhood, does it have a different cost? Like, is there any cost savings to building many at the same time?
You're 100% accurate. So we looked into things like mass producing these, maybe prefabricating in a shop and bringing them out on site. And sometimes looking into that, the cost was even more for doing that at this scale, 1 or 2 buildings. But if you were to do 100 of these, now you're talking, right? So we're just going with conventional stick-built carpentry on these, and that's certainly worth exploring further.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Hi. Since these are concrete slab houses, I didn't notice anything on the floor plans for mechanicals.
Yeah, good observation. I wasn't showing any of the duct runs or mechanical systems. There is a tankless water heater that doesn't take up very much room, and I'm showing that in the washer and dryer closet immediately next to the bathroom. So by positioning the washer machine next to the tankless water heater, which is right by the sink and the shower, you get hot water out of the heater. There's no tank, so you get hot water much more quickly. So all those things were sort of strategized to be as economic as possible.
And what about furnaces and
Sure.
Air conditioning units? And you're going to have air handlers if it's a sealed building.
You're absolutely right. And we're looking at what is called a mini split system. So there aren't ducts. It's just a small cabinet that sits on the wall. And then there's the air handler. The compressor is outside on a small concrete pad, and it will heat and cool a house this size extremely efficiently. And then, of course, the other side of that is making sure you have fresh, clean, healthy air, and you're not losing energy by exhausting, so that we're looking at heat exchangers that don't mix the air, but take the energy out of the air that's being vented, and saves money by keeping that in the space.
Greg, if you're looking at $350,000 as a selling price, how much of that is construction cost?
So that number really comes from a target of the competition, and they said assume $300,000 construction costs, and then assume the rest is your soft costs. We're trying to use the dollar lot program in Chicago, or acquiring lots for very inexpensive. That's not a huge cost, but we're finding in terms of challenges, just preparing a lot. If there's an old foundation on it, if there's contaminated soils, utility hookup is extremely expensive. All the regulation and fees and the process that's involved, that $50,000 might double. I don't know. So to maintain the goals of the competition, we're kind of squeezing that from every angle to get down to that price. But it's surprisingly difficult.
Okay, let's have another round of applause for Greg. Nice to see you all, and hope to see a lot more of you in 2020.